going.
Let's do it.
Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast where we work like a captain but play like a pirate. I'm Chris Daly, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Jason Lenox. Jason, how's it going, man?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing good. It looks like one of my kids is roaming into the background like a wild animal. All
Very
right,
cool.
Blaine,
What's
are
going
you
on?
done? You done, Blaine? Yeah. Okay.
Right on.
Yeah,
All right, man. Well, I usually like to start these things off with an icebreaker question. So today's question is, if it was raining tacos, would you eat them?
I would.
Yeah, me too. I think I'd get out the kiddie pool and just kind of just set it out in the backyard and just wait for it to fill up and have a heck of a time.
I love tacos. I've grown to like them more as I've gotten older. I've been accused in my family as being too into tacos, and why do you need tacos? I'm like, does it ever get old, right? Tacos are my
Right?
new pizza. So yes, I would collect the tacos if it rained tacos.
Heck yeah, man. Yeah, for some reason we never really had them growing up unless we went to my aunt's house, and that's where I discovered the magic of tacos, or what they're more affectionately referred
Ah,
to as white people tacos. But yeah, tacos are so great. I actually can admit that for a while I did get sick of tacos just because when my wife was pregnant with my youngest, that's all she wanted to eat was tacos. Tacos and watermelon and cornbread.
So we have a fairly local, fairly super authentic taco place near me called Lupita's.
Oh, nice.
I love Lupita's, and my family seemingly hates Lupita's. They get annoyed when I suggest going there, and I'm like, but they make really good real tacos. And my wife and kids are not on Lupita's bandwagon, despite my efforts to recruit them to enjoy Lupita's. So, shout out to my local taco niche store, Lupita's.
Very cool. All right, man. So, the concept of the show, Fueled by Weird, is, all of your hobbies, your interests, all that stuff comes together and makes you who you are. So, what are some of the stuff that you're interested in, your hobbies and stuff like that?
Hmm. Well, I would say one of my biggest, longest hobbies is collecting and watching anime, which I have been
Okay.
doing since I was a wee lad, and collecting comic books, which I've also been doing since I have been a wee lad, and other hobbies and interests. I love heavy metal music and going to live shows.
Big heavy
Uh,
metal fan. Right on.
yeah, man. So like, I would say those would be my hobbies. I'll never forget. I was at a different place of employment years ago, and it was all the fellows that worked there worked out in the field, and I did sales, and they were all very excited about camping and canoeing and all their fishing and all that stuff, and they were just going nuts about it. And I always remember this. They said, "Well, Jason, tell us how much you like fishing and camping," and I said, I don't like any of it. And I don't want to go in the woods and I don't want to go fishing or camping. And they were like shocked because it was not, they wanted everyone to be into what they were into. And
Yeah.
they said, well, if you don't like fishing and camping, where do you like to go? And I Googled a bar in New York City called Duff's, which is a heavy metal bar in Brooklyn, in
Nice.
Williamsburg.
Hmm.
It is an actual heavy metal bar, and it looks like hell on earth inside. And I said I would like to go here, not the woods. And they were all just kind of, and they were like, "Well, that doesn't look really pleasant." And I was like, "Well," I said, "I don't want to go to the woods." So there you go. How about it, right?
Going camping
That
and fishing does not look pleasant.
Yeah, that's cool to me. So yeah,
Right.
so that's kind of my hobbies at this point in life. I've never really been into sports. I played some sports as a kid. Was never really that into them, and probably the biggest thing that I enjoy doing is drawing and art, right?
Sure.
Obviously, but my hobbies and stuff would be anime, comic books, heavy metal music, and drawing. It's probably
Nice.
probably about it in a nutshell. I don't really, honestly know how much else there really is practically in my life.
There you go. So I just recently started watching anime within the last maybe 5 or so years. Do you have a favorite anime or two?
Wow.
It's probably a hard question.
I've been watching it for so long that like there's different periods in my life because I've watched it since I was very little. I remember watching it. I I I must have been like 5
Hmm.
because I remember when the late 70s, 79, we still lived in Indiana, and I would have been 4 or 5, and I remember watching Speed Racer and Battle of the Planets.
Okay.
And my parents, I that's one of the few things I remember about that time period was their living room and watching those shows on TV.
Sure.
But I would say if I had to pick favorite anime, wow, hmm, I would probably say for movies because there's movies and series. I would
Sure.
probably say for a movie, probably Akira and Ninja Scroll.
Okay.
Are my two kind of like favorite movies, with Akira probably taking the edge over Ninja Scroll. And I would say my favorite series probably gonna have to go with Bubblegum Crisis, which came out in the early '90s.
Oh, nice. I I've
Lots of other really good stuff, but I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Chris.
no, you're good. No, I was just gonna say, just within the last couple of years, I've watched quite a bit. I'm just trying to get caught up from, just years of not watching it. But I think if I had to pick one, My Hero Academia right now is probably my favorite one. I mean, there's tons that I really, really like, but that's one that I've gone back to, I think, at least once a year for a rewatch.
It's interesting. So, My Hero is really good. I have most of it except the newest season on Blu-ray. But
Nice.
my big axe to grind with newer anime, and I'm gonna lump My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, and Attack on Titan.
Okay.
I'm gonna lump them together. Is they kind of drag for me. They seem to
Okay.
really drag out some of the story arcs, and I find that sometimes I get bored watching them, waiting for them to end. Whereas if you go back to when I was a teenager, the biggest gripe was you didn't get enough. So something like Midnight Aigoku or Cyber City Oedo are infamous for having Midnight Aigoku had 2 episodes, Cyber City had 3, Battle Angel Alita had 2, and you were like left wanting more. Whereas some of the things with like Attack on Titan, especially, man, some of the seasons just drag. Where
Yeah.
you're like, man, like, is this fight over? And it's like, nope, not quite. And My Hero falls into that too.
Okay,
Where
I
you
can see
have
that.
some fights where I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like, this is dragging out so long. And there's some really good parts to My Hero, but then I just feel it's a problem with modern anime is that they just drag, it's like I said, it's reverse of the past where it was like I want more, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, now you're gonna get a lot more,
Yeah.
and sometimes it drags, in my humble opinion. And not that I don't love the modern anime, because like I said, My Hero is really good. I think the first fight with All Might and oh my goodness, the main villain, the uh, One for All. Jesus,
Hmm.
is that his name? When they have
It
that thing where
I
he does
always
like the
I always get it mixed up. It's either all for one or one for all. I know
right, yeah.
one is the power that All Might had, the other is the bad guy. I always get it mixed up though.
So that scene in season, I think it was like the second or third season where he's like United States of Smash and he hits the guy.
Yeah.
I like that. That was one of the best modern superhero moments I've seen.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sound like I'm down on My Hero because I like it. It's just sometimes I found it drags a bit, at least in
I,
my
I
opinion.
I get that. I mean, I recently just started watching One Piece.
Yep.
I'm not very far. I think I'm only one arc in, so like 75, 76 episodes, I think. So I've got a long way to go, but there's a few times where I've kind of felt like this is dragging and it's never gonna advance to the next. Like you could see the next part coming, but it's like it's just taking so long to get there because you have like the one fight where you think the fight's just about done, but then the next episode hits and it's like, oh hey, we're gonna extend this fight by like 3 or 4 more fights. So I mean, it's kind of like the same thing you said. I really, really like it so far, and I know I've got a super long way to go, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, my younger son tried to watch One Piece and he got about 256 episodes dragging me along with him, and I just could not. I just was like, I get this is really popular, but it just wasn't for me, and I could not. I just couldn't pay attention to it.
That's
And
fair.
to me, it's a it's a story pacing preference. I do kind of like my anime shorter and sweeter.
Okay.
And
I
like I
get
said,
that.
some of my favorite stuff in the past, I hate it because there was just so little.
Yeah.
And I feel now a lot of the stuff could be cut down by about 30 to 40%. It would be leaner and meaner.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe that's just part of they've got to make episodes to make product and everything else. So I do wonder about that. But again, I've been a fan for so long that there's just been different eras of fandom. So like in the 80s, it was like getting up early to watch the stuff on UHF channels at like 6 in the morning, like
Yeah.
Robotech. And then the early 90s were marked by, the beginning of buying the stuff on home video. And then, going to Suncoast, and it was like buying VHS, and then it was buying DVD. And then now the stuff's widely available on streaming, but I still like to get Blu-rays. And we're actually kind of in a golden era for re-releases where there's a couple of boutique companies that I really like,
Yeah.
Discotheque being one of them, where they're doing really high-end re-releases of much older anime, where they're doing special editions. Like, so for example, Memories came out in 1995, I believe, from Streamline Pictures, and it was a
Okay.
Katsuhiro Otomo anthology. And the VHS or original DVD or whatever it was out on back in the day was kind of rough, and they just put it out on Blu-ray, and they did a very in-depth cleanup and re-release the film, but they actually even cleaned up some of the primitive digital effects in it. And then one of the nice things in the new Blu-ray is you can watch the side-by-side comparison. And if you're a real geek for this stuff, to see what you did see versus what they've done to clean it up is great. Now, on the one hand, I'm not a fan of like the Star Wars special effects where Lucas went back and like redid special effects.
Yeah.
Um, I feel these are different because this is more like we're trying to clean it up, so it actually looks like it was supposed to look. But I would say the more primitive home video transfer processes kind of like junked it down. So I feel like now it's almost like getting glasses, and you're getting to see some of these things for the first time. Like the Akira Blu-ray transfer is just, it's just if you love Akira like I do, it's so crisp and it's so clean, and you could actually see some of the art that was in it in the first place. It's just on
Yeah.
a shittier transfer. It just was wiped out. So it's good we're having this anime podcast. I love it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have an anime podcast that I've been thinking about bringing back, to life. It has a couple episodes, but
And
I
well,
figure,
no, this
not a lot of people talk about anime that much. So I figure, you're the first person in a while that's even brought up anime. So I figure, yeah, let's take a minute, we'll talk about it.
No, I love it, and I love seeing people such as yourself that are getting into it. Because I've been a fan for a long time. What I never want to be is like a gatekeeper. I want to try to like welcome. Like I've always loved it, and
Yeah.
I always kind of want to be like a welcoming, old school fan where it's like let's get excited about new stuff, old stuff, and get excited about new people getting into it. As much as I do talking to other old heads that have been watching it for
Yeah.
decades. So it's awesome, man. I'm glad you discovered it.
Yeah, I mean, and I was the same way or not the same way. For a long time, I was like, I'm not gonna watch anime. It's so stupid and blah blah blah. And for a long time, I just was just very staunchly against it. But all of a sudden, just one day, I'm like, there's no reason I can't be trying this out. I mean, really, there's not. And so I kind of just dabbled in like a little bit of Death Note, and I've got My Hero Academia,
Yep.
um, and a few others. And yeah, I really like it a lot. So I've been kind of just trying to catch up as quick as I can, just because, but there's just so much.
And to be fair, there is some really bad anime out there, and there's bad
Sure.
anime in different eras. So I think that's one
Yeah.
thing kind of weird about anime. People say, I saw, they'll see something like some kind of like kids simplistic thing and say it's just a bunch of stuff for kids. And it's like saying you don't like music.
Yeah.
And it's like, what music did you hear exactly? You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there's all kinds of music. So I mean, with anime, like I kind of like more of the science fiction action thriller.
Sure.
Uh, so for me, you can watch like Ghost in the Shell, Perfect Blue, Silent Mobius. There's so much. So I mean, to me,
Yeah.
I always if people are like, well, it's dumb or I don't like it or it's silly. It's like I'm always like, what have you watched? You know what I mean? Like, there's probably something you'd like, but there's just so much that depending on what you stumble into, you may find something that's not good because
Yeah.
admittedly there's stuff that's not good or not for you, right?
Right.
You know, So good for you on giving it a shot.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and I've found a lot of stuff. One of the ones I liked a lot was Cowboy Bebop. That was one that I think would fall into the category that you were mentioning. It's you want a little bit more, but it's very like a short, nice and sweet little story all wrapped up.
Yeah, no, Cowboy Bebop is one of the ones that there is so much I think fans wishing there would have been more, and
Yeah.
there was never any past that season. And Cowboy Bebop was kind of special because it was in the last era of hand done animation.
Mm,
So I'm pretty sure everything in that is by hand, which,
okay.
that's kind of a there's a lot of CG anime now. There is some that I like, but I do have a place in my heart for the handmade anime or hand
Yeah.
drawn.
Mm,
And Cowboy Bebop was in the late '90s, so it was kind of as completely physically done, hand drawn anime was kind of running its course, and it's totally slipping my brain. But there's an anime that came out around the same time as Cowboy Bebop that wasn't quite as popular, but I will have to send it to you to check out because if you
okay.
like Cowboy Bebop, and of course I have it on a shelf in another part of my basement, but I don't want to leave. So let me leave the podcast, right?
Yeah.
And I'll go over and pull the anime off the shelf. But if I can't remember it during the show, I'll have to send it to you because
Yeah.
it's
Just hit me up later.
kind of similar in tone. I have to go find it, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, it's this, and it's
Okay. Yeah, I'm always looking for more recommendations. So yeah, anytime you think of one that I should try out, just hit, you know where to find me on DM, so just hit me up.
yeah, man,
Cool. Well, and also you mentioned Suncoast, and man, I miss that store so very much.
yeah. So our mall where I live in State College, Pennsylvania, is
Mm,
it's like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie at this point. And every now and then we go there for one odd reason or another. Typically, like Santa photos at this point, or like
sure.
Easter photos, which my kids are
Yeah.
starting to they're getting too old. But there still is the build out from Suncoast, and it's been gone now for 15 years, and I still walk past it and get the feels.
Yep.
I missed the Suncoast card. I had these two geeky dudes that worked there, and they knew me, and they would be like, "Oh my God, it came in, the thing we knew you'd be here for." I used to get so much pleasure out of going
Ah,
to the
man.
store, and I walk past the built out shell, and I'm just like, it hits me in the feels, man, because
Yeah.
I miss going to that store.
Yeah, the build out in our mall where it used to be, they actually kind of replaced it with the whole area where it was, they replaced it with a Barnes and Noble, and they like took out our food court and everything and just have a big Barnes and Noble there now, which is cool. But yeah, I think about the Suncoast all the time because, a lot of people are like, "You're old enough to know what Suncoast is." I'm old enough to know what Suncoast is. So I'm like you, I get the same kind of feels. My dad and I used to go all the time and just kind of just wander around and just check stuff out. And it was kids these days just don't appreciate that kind of thing.
So I think, one of the things that has changed, and we don't need to say how old we are,
Okay.
but right, it's like don't ask my age or my weight. But you do hit a point the older you get, and kind of what I was saying about anime, that I'll have younger fans ask me about, like, what was it like collecting, and how do I feel about anime, or even like any of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm old enough now that it's not only the content, it's how we consume the content. So, I remember going to South Street in Philadelphia to underground stores buying VHS tapes that were like third generation bootlegs that weren't even in English, and you would have to try to make up the story. And
Oh
then, what I
wow.
mean? And, part of that era of collecting was the weird adventure of getting the material. So that was
Yeah, yeah.
part, you know what I mean? And, I remember going to video arcades with quarters. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like I
Yeah, me
lived
too.
through it. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's like I remember talking to someone recently about I remember seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was a little kid. And I remember that era of movies where obviously now there's so much online criticism. If there's a trailer release, it's immediately dissected and everyone's, picking it apart and still framing it. But
Yeah.
I vaguely remember the era of just like going to the movies and like you would just see a movie and it was like, oh. And I remember as a kid that I loved the Flash Gordon movie, the
Okay.
Queen track. And I remember seeing it and really liking it and remember thinking like I may never see it again. And I remember there was a picture in a magazine and I cut it out and I saved it because I was like, I have to save this memory of seeing this movie. Because you'd
Yeah.
see it like, okay, like I hope I can remember it
Yeah.
because that's it. And I remember saving that picture from a magazine because it was a color glossy and I sliced it out. And that was it, and it was like, wow, I may never see it again, Chris. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, the media is still the same per se, but the message you may have gotten from it and even the experience of how you got to see it is different, right?
Right.
And I do think that media can change depending on when you see it, read it, feel it, touch it, and do you read it on a phone or did you read it on paper? I still like the smell of paper. And I really still love to this day that smell of old comic books on pulp,
Yeah.
where it
Yeah.
almost has that moldy smell.
Yep.
And I know that's probably not a good thing, right? The moldy smell. But
It's nostalgic.
yeah, I have a lot of pleasurable memories as a
Yeah.
kid of this old, four color printed newsprint pulp. And you would smell that like ink and pulp.
Yeah.
Um, the books aged like they were going through a decomposition process where it's like, oh yeah, like that's the comic book smell, right?
Yeah.
um so you do like that. Oh, by the way, that anime Outlaw Star, that's what I'm thinking of.
Okay. I'm gonna
So
write
if
that
you
down.
like Cowboy Bebop, there is a high probability you will enjoy and appreciate Outlaw Star.
Okay.
It's a little bit more outrageous than Cowboy Bebop, but kind of a similar feel of like kind of piratey spaceship kind of outlaw type people. So check out Outlaw Star from the
Yeah.
same, I think it's from like 97, 98,
Okay.
same hand drawn anime. Really good. I enjoy it. Never as popular as Cowboy Bebop, but I really enjoy it. Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to really any suggestions 'cause I've watched all sorts of stuff, including, just like the kitty stuff, the reincarnated as a vending machine. I don't know if you've seen that one, but
Yeah.
that one's pretty fun. I mean, it's nothing like super memorable or shocking or amazing, but it's an enjoyable show. And
So
like you were saying about, watching the movies and just trying to soak it in and remember it, I
mhm.
have very vivid memories of that too, because back in the day, you'd go to the theater and watch a movie. You're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see this again because, like 6 months to a year later, then it finally gets released, on home video or whatever. So it's like, oh yeah, I remember this movie. But now you've got the turnaround of, a couple of months. So it's no big deal really. But back then it's like, I don't know when I know I'm going to see this again. I just don't know when that's going to happen.
So I'll give you kind of my weirdest kind of comic book life experience. And I don't know if I've ever talked about this with anybody. So this is a
Okay,
first, right? For Fueled
perfect.
by Weird is
Breaking news.
breaking news, breaking news. So Battle Angel Alita, I
Okay.
remember that I saw a poster for that, and it must have been in like 1990.
Okay.
And I remember I got for free a fold-out poster of the iconic image of Alita, where she's like half machine, half naked, but she's like falling apart and she's crawling and she has wings. And I just thought it was really cool. And it was one of their main marketing images.
Yeah.
And I remember I got that as a free fold out poster, and I was like, what is this? Right. So that might have been in like 1990,
Okay.
give or take. And so that comic was published by Viz as floppies, like US floppies, because it was
Mhm.
too much to have it as a collection.
Yeah.
Uh, and then they put out the manga, like the smaller size collections, but they were flipped, so they were like US oriented.
Yeah.
I still am collecting that series till today.
Oh wow.
And Yukito Kishiro did it for 9 volumes, ended it, brought it back, did like an encore, and now he's doing like the next part of the story. And I think I have close to 30 some collection shelf where it's like it's getting so weird now because I'm like, I hope I live long enough for this to end because I've
Yeah.
been reading it for so damn long now that like it's even the people that were even in my life have
Yeah.
changed. Because when I first was collecting it, all my grandparents were alive. Now they're all dead. Now I
Yeah.
have kids. So it's like even my reading it, like, because I remember I bought at a store that no longer exists, and now I buy the new collections on Amazon. So even like where, kind of going back to Suncoast, like where am I buying this, and where am I at? I mean, it's been so damn long
Yeah.
that even when I think about it, I'm like, good lord, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yep, I do.
Like all the things that have happened in the world in the last 34 years. I mean, like, and I'm still reading this damn comic book, and you're like, man, I really hope it ends on a good note.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, we talk about fueled by weird. That's
Yeah.
fueled by weird, man. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
very
Like,
much.
yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah. So those are some of the really kind of weird things we get involved in when we love this stuff. Is like you're
it's
you're
true.
reading now for decades,
Yeah.
and like who's gonna last longer, me or the comic, right? I hope we each last. I hope we each last the exact right amount of time.
The last thing you do is read the last page, and then it's like, oh, that's it, I'm done. And then you guys just both finish together.
Yeah, I'll be like, I read it.
Yep.
Yeah,
What a way to go.
yeah. And it's always been done by the same, Yukito Kishiro is the writer and artist, and I'm sure he has probably some assistants and stuff, but it's like
Sure.
he's been doing it,
That's
and
cool.
it's a wild ass comic, and I don't know if you've ever read it.
I haven't.
Oddly enough, it was an anime, and I mentioned it earlier. It was a 2 episode OVA. That's it, just two
Hmm.
episodes, like two 40-minute cartoons, and that was it. It was a live action film a couple years ago. I didn't
I
want to see the live action
I do
film
remember
because
that.
I couldn't stand what they did to the actress's eyes.
That was weird.
Well, it was what was really weird to me is I was like, well, okay, if there's a core audience for this movie, it's me.
Sure.
Like I'm the core audience,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I was all excited to see the trailer, and the director was said something like, "I'm a huge fan," and then the trailer looked terrible to me. Then he's like, "Well, the character has big eyes in the manga, so we had to give her big eyes in the movie." And I'm like, dude, like the guy that has a cartoonish style. So like one of the main male characters, he has a head like Beaker from the Muppets, and I'm like,
yeah.
didn't he just is a regular actor in the
Yeah.
movie? He doesn't have a head like Beaker. Like you do realize the guy that draws it has a style. So Alita has the classic anime little mouth, big eyes. She like it's like bro, it's like she doesn't have a big deform. You know what I mean? Like she's supposed to just be a pretty teenage girl. She
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
have like big eyes. Like that's a style. So it was such a turn off that I was like, I will not see this movie. I will not see this movie.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, for anyone that's still here after our big nerd out, going back to what you said earlier, you mentioned that you do spend a lot of your time doing art. I want to know, I want to kind of get in the Wayback Machine and find out what was it growing up that kind of inspired you to get into art in the first place.
So I remember some of my earliest memories as a little kid were just drawing. I always liked to draw.
Hmm.
And my mom told me a story, and I'd be lying if I said I remembered it really well, where my mom was trying to draw for me, and she said that I smacked her hand, took a crayon from her, corrected it, and gave it back to her.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
uh, and she said we just knew you liked to draw, and I have a memory of my parents encouraging me to play like a French horn, and I just was like, no, and that's what they knew. They had played band instruments, and I had no interest in that. And I remember being put into private art classes
Hmm.
outside of school in kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
that and again, I have partial memories of this stuff, and then my
Sure.
mom's kind of filled in bits and pieces where she said that my art teacher, that we had art class, in
Yeah.
kindergarten, that the teacher was like, he's needs some kind of special instruction, so he gave my mom a name, and I went to an art studio, like a lot of kids did, piano or whatever. I did art
Yeah.
classes, and one of the things I remember as a kid was I really wanted a comic book, and my parents were not wired for that, and I was taking swim lessons, and I was petrified to go off a diving board. And I remember my mom was like, "We will buy a comic book if you dive off the diving board." And I remember like that encouraged me to do it. So I
Oh
got like an
wow.
incredible book. So that to me was a big deal to get a comic book, because it wasn't what my parents were into. Like they were
Sure.
not wired that way.
Yeah.
But it was what I was into, so I was like always trying to get it. And I
Okay.
remember slowly building up a comic book collection as a kid,
Hmm.
and then also going to do art. And they kind of go hand in hand, right? You
Sure.
like to look at the pros, and you like to try to get better. Uh, so I recall doing more and more stuff with art, and one of the other things that I recall from being a kid was in high school in Pennsylvania in the early 90s. They had a program called Governor School for the Arts, which was a program that was started in the 60s, probably kind of a hippie era, right? Like, let's be creative, like, let's
Yeah.
reward creative kids. So, Pennsylvania for quite some time had this program where they would put kids that were gifted in the arts into this special full scholarship summer program. So, like, famously, Kevin Bacon was one of the original kids that went there for acting,
Oh wow.
right? So I went to that in the early 90s for a summer. And it was just being around kids that were good at art, dance, acting, writing, poetry, etc. And, you kind of opened your mind up a little bit. And I remember one of the instructors was like, "You are handicapped because, maybe not handicapped is the right word, but you are kind of restricting yourself. Like you're
Hmm.
very close minded." She's like, "You need to like open it up." And she wrote that down for me, and I still have it here at my office at home, like tacked up on my wall years later. It made more sense to me.
Sure.
And I remember there was kind of an internal struggle for me about going to a 4 year school for art, right? To become like a professional artist, or trying to get more of a traditional business degree. And at the time, early 90s, I kind of had a lot of thought and introspection. And I ended up going to college for business, and I got a degree in bachelor's of science in business administration and marketing, because I was really into becoming a professional salesperson. I thought that would be a good job, and it is a good job, and that's what I do for my full-time job. I work in heating and air conditioning sales,
Oh,
so
nice.
I sell air conditioning and furnaces to people that put those things in your house or business. Um, and I think like a lot of people, and I'd say I would fall into this, like you get older, you get kind of more away from things that are more creative, more fun, and probably more
Yeah.
associated with kids. The kids are doing this stuff because they're kids, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of times the arts and those creative things can kind of get belittled as childish,
Yep.
and I think that's kind of part of what makes being an adult kind of sad and boring.
Yep.
And I kind of went away from that stuff for a while, for a couple
I
of
get
years, and
it.
was just very businessman
Yep.
and everything else. And then about 13 years ago, which would have been around like 2010, 2011, I started to kind of get the itch again to say, I kind of miss doing this stuff. I really kind of feel that maybe I kind of left part of myself behind. So around that time is when I started really pushing myself to do art, illustration, and comics again. And so around that time, 2011, I started trying to do like my first couple short stories, doing comics again. And then I put my first comic book on Kickstarter back in 2012. So it's been Hey, can you get me a water? Thanks, buddy. Um, I got kids coming out of my ears apparently. But
That's okay.
so there's been different eras, right? Like different
Yeah,
eras of me being an anime fan where there's an era where I didn't do any art, and there was an era that's all I did, and there's an era where like I'm in the work world and people know me as like professional sales guy. And thanks, buddy, for that White Claw. Appreciate it. Thank you. Uh, and so now some people are like, oh, we know him because he sells us. No, you can't. I'm busy doing this. So people know me as a person that is involved in the business community, but a lot of people also know me as a person that makes comic books, right?
sure.
And we wear a couple different hats.
Yeah,
And it's weird because I'm in my 40s now, and there are times where I do wonder, what if I'd have made different choices in life, and what if I'd have done this different or that different? And I have a couple thoughts on that. As for myself as a creative, and I would give it to anybody else. Is one, I don't regret the choices I made because it's where I am today, and worrying about things that are in the past. Like there's really not a whole lot of point in putting energy into that because we can't change them.
right,
It's kind of wasted energy. But on the other hand, all things being considered, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at because um, I do well enough at my regular job that it gives my art a space to be free, so I can do things that aren't necessarily the most commercially viable, and I can kind of do things that I want to do versus having to do stuff for paid clients where it's like I want you to design a magazine cover or draw my family portrait or whatever that you may just be like I don't really care, but if I got to pay the bills, I got to pay the bills.
right.
Um, so you take advantage of where you're at and try to maximize where you put yourself and do the best you can.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my personal creative journey to where I'm at today, making Lords of the Cosmos, right? Which is five
Yeah.
issues deep.
Yeah, and I there's a lot of similarities to your story and mine, because, for a long time, I followed the same path where I decided, some of the stuff I was into, I just wasn't going to be into it anymore because for a number of reasons, one of which was I was sick of just being alone and I wanted to have a girlfriend. So I thought, if I just take all this stuff that people would consider childish and I'm sick of getting made fun of it, I'm just going to give it all up for a while. And for a while I did, and kind of things went, the way I wanted. I was able to find my girlfriend and now wife. We've been together for a super long time. And, I'm not in my 40s yet, but a week from, so next Friday I'll turn 40. And I kind of wonder a lot of the same things you do is, should I have picked different things? Should I have gone a different way? But, like you, if I would have picked those different things, I wouldn't end up where I am now. And, I don't regret anything because I am where I am now. Just, and you can't change the past. And luckily, a few years after being with my wife, the nerdy stuff kind of started to come out again. And I'm like, I kind of was the same with you. Like, I'm gonna, there's just because I'm grown up, just because I'm an adult, doesn't mean I can have to give up this stuff. If, just because it's considered childish, it doesn't have to be. It's stuff that makes you happy. So why not, do stuff that makes you happy? And, and so luckily I didn't scare my wife away too bad because she ended up, not caring. She was actually very accepting of the fact that, I'm finally letting my true self out. And she was like, why aren't you doing this before? Yeah, I just kind of just ended up being a closeted nerd. So it's good to embrace that stuff, and that's kind of the whole concept of the fueled by weird thing. It's like, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you still can't enjoy the stuff you liked as a kid. There's no reason to give that up because, they always say there's only a limited time here, so you should do things that you enjoy and not do things that make you miserable. So why not do some of the stuff you did as a kid? There's really no reason, just because people think it's for kids, that doesn't matter.
So one of the funniest comments that I'll hear as a creative is from people that are just citizens.
Yeah.
They'll say something like this: are you, are you on drugs? Like this, like so when they see things that are very creative, there's an assumption that you're on drugs,
Yeah,
probably some kind of hallucinogenic, and I I know they mean it as a compliment, and I've had to unpack that because I've heard it a lot over the years, where it's like these are people that probably aren't really creative. They see things that are very creative. They don't know how to relate to it because they can't think like that. So the only thing they can compare it to is either using alcohol or drugs.
sure.
And I know it's complimentary, and I know they mean well by it, and they're trying to express some kind of like lack of understanding. But what to me is really strange about it is the things that I do that seem wild and fantastic. They're like being an architect building a building,
Yeah,
like making a comic book and working with the writers, working with the letters, working with the graphic designers, doing artwork, doing character design, all that stuff. It's like it's nerve-wracking, difficult work. It might look fantastic, but it requires sobriety and it requires a ton of work, coordination, and skill. And again, I would say it's similar to designing a building where you're an architect coordinating with plumbers, electricians, and roofers, and product specifications and all that stuff. So I've
yeah,
often found that very interesting that there's this, oh my God, this looks really weird. Like, are you on drugs? It's like, no, because everything in here is a lot of work with scale, perspective, editing, storytelling, character design. It's actually, very difficult work. But if you think it's a drug trip, then I guess that means it did a really good job.
yeah,
I've always found that to just be one of the strangest. I don't even know if it's a backhanded insult, compliment, but it's like, are you on drugs? No. But yeah, if you think I am, then you think whatever you want to think. But making these books is a titanic labor.
yeah. It's almost like you said that people just for some reason can't make the association to something other than this guy must be completely insane because they just see something they're not used to seeing or just see something that's they've never seen before. So they just have to make that assumption because they don't have any other way to relate it to anything else.
The term that I hear a lot of creatives use now, and I take it for what it's worth, but I've heard it more and more over the years, is just that they're muggles. Like, I mean, they don't get it,
Yeah,
right?
that's awesome.
It's kind of a derogatory term I think creatives are using kind of on the sly when they hear stuff like that. It's like that they're smuggles. They can't even they can't understand it, and it's
Yep.
okay, right? We love our muggles.
Yes, we do.
But that's that drug comment to me has always come across as like, really? Okay.
Yeah, they almost think like saying that is better than saying you're weird or something like that because I'd almost rather you just say you're weird than say, are you on drugs? Like, I no, but okay, whatever.
I'll break this down for you. I saw this once and it sticks in my head. What it was like dork, nerd, and geek. And it was like dorks like cool things but don't understand why they like them. Nerds like those things. Oh, thanks for the water, son. Now I have two drinks. Yes. And nerds like cool stuff and understand it. Geeks like cool stuff, understand cool stuff, and can create or fix cool stuff.
Yep.
So there's different tiers of right of like, what are like you're
Yep.
a nerd. I'm a geek, sir. Actually, I'm a geek. Please
Yeah.
get your derogatory names correct. Like, create, fix, edit, and critique, and be in those spaces. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Please respect the vernacular.
please get your derogatory term on me correct, bro.
Yeah, I
Because
actually had I actually had someone a few years ago because I do IT in my day job, and I had someone a few years ago try to call me a nerd as an insult, and I was like, "Are we in junior high? Like, I haven't had anyone try to insult me being a nerd in forever." And it was kind of funny because another person that was kind of waiting in my line, they ended up totally ripping this person apart for trying to like, "You're gonna come to him for help, but you're gonna make fun of him? Like, what's wrong with you?" Like,
so I'll kind of I'll give you some even weirder perspective on that.
okay,
So um, one of the coolest things I think that exists now is there's anime conventions. So
yeah,
I do two of them every year that I have connections to that are semi-local to me. One is called Setsucon, which is the Penn State Animation Convention that happens every January.
Hmm.
And there's another one called ZenkaiCon, which I do in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which has been going on for almost 20 years now, maybe even longer. But I enjoy both shows. And typically when I'm at them, I am one of the old heads at the show.
Sure.
And I have fun. I love talking about it. And what amazes me is there's so many young fans, right? And not only is there young fans, and that's who most of it is, but it's all genders, right? So there's everyone, right?
Yeah.
So I go back in my Wayback Machine to when I was at art school in the early 90s. So at that time, one of the coolest things was one of my good friends at that art school for the summer was a guy named Keith, and Keith liked anime too. I had never met another anime fan ever. I just watched it by myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So meeting another anime fan in the early 90s was oh, there's more than just me. And so I
Yeah.
remember we got to talking, which was just insane because it was like, oh my God, like you like this stuff too. And throughout our conversation, it was, I think we can go buy this stuff on videotape now. Well, at that time, for this scholarship event, they would have like a mall trip in a bus on like a Saturday.
Yeah.
So we took the mall trip to the bus because we heard there was a comic book store at the mall where we were at in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so this comic book store had Bubblegum Crisis on VHS for like $60 for one episode
Oh wow.
and like a clamshell thing. So we scraped
Yeah.
our cash together and we each bought one VHS. So we had two episodes of the show.
Oh wow.
We brought them back to where we were at, which was a college campus called Mercyhurst College. So there was a community TV with a VCR. And I remember you had to like wait your turn. Like, well, okay, Chris wants to watch this, but we'll watch next. So when it was our turn to watch the TV, we were like, we're gonna watch an anime VHS. And I'll never forget. We throw this on, and it's in my memory is very strong of the young women that were there. Were like, "What the f? You guys are losers. What is this?" And I'm not
Yeah.
going to swear on your show, but
You're
I mean,
fine.
it was just you guys suck. You guys are this that. Just derogatory term. And we just wanted to watch our stuff. And again, it's so weird being a fan for all these years when it's like I know one other fan and we threw on one anime and it was like you guys are losers, you're blah, 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 blah. And yet now I go to like an anime show and one is a ton of young women, and secondly I've had shows where I've seen kids with their parents right or their parents, and their parents are like, Jason, could you please explain this to me? My kids are into this, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, like you follow this stuff long enough and you're just kind of like, you remember when like I tried to watch this and it was like one person and then everyone's like, "You guys are losers,"
Yep.
and now it's like it's the anime convention. Oh my god! And
Yep.
you're just kind of like, wow, how times have changed.
Yeah. I mean, it's like all the stuff we got made fun of when we were kids. It's like
Yeah,
now everyone wants to come to us for the explanations of why does this work this way and why is this going this way and why is this person the way they are. Yeah, I get
what is
it.
my son watching? What is my daughter into? Jason, could you
Yep.
explain to me? I don't understand it.
Yep.
So yeah, there is kind of a little bit of kind of so yeah to have somebody like, oh, you're a nerd because you like that stuff. It's like, yeah, am I?
Yeah. Amongst other things, pro wrestling's probably the one for me that kind of got the same treatment where you like that stuff, you know it's fake, right? I'm like, yeah, I do. I know it's fake, but I like watching it but for the same reason you like watching any of your favorite shows. Because I've got characters I like, I've got characters I don't like. I want to see week to week how the story progresses. Like really, you could fit that outline in literally any show.
So to be fair, I didn't have any respect for wrestling until I watched the movie The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
So good.
And and then there was a couple featurettes with that actually kind of deep dove into wrestling,
Yeah.
and I watched them all, and I came away from that being like, okay, this movie decoded for me why people like you like wrestling. And then when I realized the level of violence at the lower levels and how much damage wrestlers were actually taking for something that I don't even want to call it fake because it's real. I mean, it's like I said, I walked away from being like, oh, this is bullshit. I don't like this, right?
Yeah,
That movie for me as a cinema fan turned me around. And I'm not into
sure.
wrestling after that, but
Yeah,
like I went from having no respect to like it converted me into saying, I respect this. Like I get it, I respect it. I feel that I it's not for me per se,
sure.
but I get it, and I've respected it since that movie. So for what it's worth, I think that movie for me did what it was supposed to do. It switched my opinion.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, and it really it's not that it's fake, it's more that the outcome is predetermined. And sure, some of the hits, are fake. Or not really fake, they're just kind of like they pull their punches and stuff. But a lot of that stuff really is real and a lot of it really hurts. And it's not for everybody, and that's okay. And if for people who don't like it, I don't judge them. It's just unfortunate that, the people that don't like it, they judge me for liking it. And it's like really, if you think about it, it's more than just wrestling. It's a show, but it's a show about wrestling. Because like I said, you could literally pick any TV show that you like watching. Why do you like watching it? Well, I've got these characters I like, these characters I don't like, and I want to watch every week to see what happens with these characters. It's the same thing for wrestling. But I'm not trying to like talk anyone into, hey, you should be a wrestling fan. Like I said, it's not for everybody, but it's just something I like to watch, and it's the only sport that I really watch.
So there's a crazy Venn diagram that you're probably aware of where it's like there's comic books, horror films, like pro wrestling, tattoos, and
Oh
like
yeah.
you can kind of start seeing them all fit together.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Heavy metal takes one of those too.
music
Yeah.
and like I'm not into all of them, but I get it.
Yep.
I forget the other day I saw the clip from the Munsters with Dracula the car
Yeah, yeah.
where Herman and Grandpa roll it out, and I was
Mhm.
laughing because I'm like, this scene seems to hit like that Venn diagram of like hot rods,
Yeah.
car film. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Where I'm like, this is like, and again, I don't know that there's everyone that's into all of them, but you'll meet someone that's like, yeah, I like comic books and like, wrestling and
Yep.
horror film, but not heavy metal music. And you're like, oh, okay. Or someone's like, oh, I like heavy metal music and like comic books. And you're like, yeah, and
Yeah.
like, so it's like I feel that like those, and there's probably more if we sat and thought about it, but
Yeah.
I get it. It's kind of all of our people, either they're in our people or it's like, okay, like you're our people, you're horror film people, you're wrestling,
Yep.
like we're all kind of the same flavor. Uh, like baseball, you know what I mean? Like, no, you're
Yeah.
not in the Venn diagram. Like
Yeah.
you can have your own thing, but like you're not in the horror film, wrestling,
Yeah.
comic book, tattoo, et cetera, et cetera. So I get it. And like I said,
Yeah.
that the movie The Wrestler, that turned me 180.
Yeah,
I, I
that was a good one for sure. Okay, so I apologize for all the tangents. I just think we've just been having a really good
this
conversation.
is fun, man.
So
That's what this
it's
stuff's all about. I love these chats.
absolutely, absolutely. So, you mentioned before your comic book series is Lords of the Cosmos, which I
Yes.
appreciate you letting me read the issues. They were fantastic. I finished reading them this morning. They were so, so good. Um, for those that don't know about Lord of the Cosmos, why don't we give you a minute to kind of just pitch and tell everyone, what it's about?
So imagine a post-apocalyptic world called Aiden that has been rocked by decades or even centuries of war between two factions. One of superpowered terrorists led by a cyborg uh, zombie maniac monster leader that is in the final phase of the last war they're having against a group of ragtag heroes led by what looks like a fallen Greek god and his army of ragtag robots, talking animals, etc. And the world has technology, the world has magic, and the world has a population and is kind of governed by a living machine. And the first issue picks up where both of these sides from this war are knocked down from the mat, and they're both kind of getting back up for like one last one last go round because like they keep fighting over the years, right?
Yeah.
And and this is it. This is the final conflict between the Lords of the Cosmos and the disciples of Umex, and that's kind of the general pitch for it, the elevator pitch, so to speak. The way the book is formatted, for those that don't know, it is a black and white anthology that's all set in the same world. So each book has a main story that I do the art for that connects from issue to issue that's kind of building towards this climactic end times. And then each issue has little tangent stories that build off the main story. So as you're introduced to small elements in the main story, the side story is just kind of like a tree. So each issue starts to spotlight down these rabbit holes. And the fun part about that is sometimes the side stories are really fun, but we get to have different artists and writers do them.
Yeah.
So the Lords of the Cosmos has a lot of strength because it has a lot of diversity in the writing and the art. And obviously you got to read the book, so you definitely got to see that, Chris, where it goes all over the place.
Yeah.
And the format of the books is sort of like 2000 AD, which is the old Judge Dredd, black and white anthology from the UK, or Heavy Metal Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as themes and flavors, from our cookbook, what we took was things that we liked from when we were kids, from some of our kind of science fiction, barbarian, post-apocalyptic stories that we like, such as Thunder the Barbarian, Masters of the Universe, Flash Gordon, and Thundercats, which were all kind of that same vein. And what
Yeah.
we wanted to do as creators when we started this back in 2016 was to bring those feelings in, but not be completely uh, like a pastiche, where it's like this is exactly like this, where it's like it's original, but you can kind of get the feels, but it's not just it's just not it's not like, hey, this they're just completely redoing this, where it's like you may pick up on elements that seem familiar, but it's all different. So one of the things that's fun to say, it's like let's rediscover all the stuff you like again for the first time, where it's like you can read Lords of the Cosmos and get those feels, and we'll have to get your take on it, that it's original enough that it stands on its own and it isn't completely uh I'm trying to think of the right word, but completely I'm lost. I can't think of the right word, but
I got
I
you.
want it to be original enough, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't want it to be like a direct carbon copy of something or even
Correct.
like a rip off of something. You want it to
Correct.
be different, be similar but different enough that it can stand on its own.
Correct. So to me, I would say it's like a genre piece. Like if you like a gangster genre or a Western genre, that there's certain elements that you may want to have, but you can always
Yeah,
tell an original Western or an original gangster film about having the same elements, right?
absolutely.
So derivative. I don't want it to be too derivative. That's the word I
Yep.
wanted to use. So like you
Absolutely.
might recognize some things that seem familiar from some of those things, but it's like, yeah, but it's not the same. But
Right.
it's okay. I recognize it as a Western because there's guys with cowboy hats and 6 shooters and horses, but it's
Yeah.
different. This isn't the same six shooters, horses, and cowboys, etc., that you saw in like Fistful of Dollars or Unforgiven, but it's an original one. But this is like science fiction barbarians, right? Where
Yeah.
there's powered guys with swords and over the top villains, but it's done in a different way. So there's kind of my overall elevator pitch, theme, style, and format. For those that don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, when I, like you mentioned, I was, or like we talked about already, I got the chance to read them, and for the length of this show, I've got to talk to a lot of Kickstarter creators, and usually, the issues are just, the standard regular size issues, the 20-ish pages. So that's kind of what I expected with this one. What I wasn't expecting was these humongous books that were just full of all sorts of greatness. They were amazing. You've got, I think it was like 50 some odd pages per book. And there was just
But
so much,
540, they're big. These are
yeah,
like king size issues.
there's so much story in them, which I wasn't expecting, but I was very pleasantly surprised that there's just, like you said, you've got your main story, then you've got all these little side stories that eventually, you'll read a side story in one that kind of doesn't make sense, but later on you'll read something else that, oh, okay, I remember that from over here. It clicks back in. So it all comes together really nicely. And just it was cool, like you said, how you'll have your main story that's drawn one way. You'll have all these different side adventures or other alternate stories that are drawn different ways that I think really do add a lot to it. Um, And your cast of characters is fantastic. There are so many cool characters that I could tell, that you mentioned Masters of the Universe, where, there's also quite an array of characters there. I can tell that you guys kind of drew inspiration from that, but you still were different enough to come up with some characters that I have never seen or heard before from, anything.
Thank you. And I think one of the other things is the more issues we've done, it kind of stacks. So like one of the really cool things about issue 5 is we really drill into like what's going on behind the scenes with the villains.
Yeah.
And noticed when we go into Zemba's backstory and why she decides to turn heel on the other villains is you go back to issue 2 where we go behind the scenes where they initiate a new villain and then she
Yeah.
gets embarrassed. And then that gets brought back up in issue 5, which also flashes back before the incident in issue 4 where her
Yep.
friend Lady Vi gets killed,
Hmm.
right? And Mordanix gets turned into a cyborg, and there's a
Yep.
little payback there. So you're like, oh my goodness, so all this. So as you
Yep.
read more of these issues, like, so we're building this thing with the villains behind the scenes where it's like these two were friends, and now the one's getting and you're like, oh. So if you're picking up on some of this stuff, it's like you said, like the Zemba story in issue 2, right, with
Yeah.
Mindozer. So you're like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. But
Yep.
then like it starts to stack where it's like you do like because they bring it up and they're like, and then there's like the little see issue 2. Like we like to have those like
Mhm.
see that, see that. So you're like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, there's stuff going on. So, the more we get to do, the more we get to kind of build this like big layered crazy universe where we wanted to make it so when you start reading issue 1, it just drops you into this world
Yep.
where it's like stuff going on
Yep.
and it's already like see this, see that, and you're like, whoa, you know, that it's just thick and the books are big and like it's
Yeah.
just it dropped you into it. And like you said, there's a lot going on.
And I like how you mentioned that she turned heel. So I think you're a little bit more of a wrestling fan than
Yeah,
you like to
see?
allude to. But yeah,
Well,
it was really good. I really liked him a lot, and just totally forgot where I was going with that now. So never mind. Go ahead.
see, I threw that wrestling term and you're like, hey,
You
like
did. I glommed onto that and I forgot what I was gonna say. So but never mind. But yeah, go ahead.
no, so it's been really fun to do that. And we know where the story's gonna go. It's got a couple more issues until it kind of goes to like a climax, but it's really fun. And I enjoy when people such as yourself get to read it and discover it because I think we've made a really fun, unique comic book world that has really great art and
Yeah.
really fun writing, and it's different and it's a little eccentric and it's a little weird, and I love when people discover it and have fun with it, and to really just kind of make a comic book that just should just stand out. For all the right reasons and just be like well, yeah, I liked it and it was just different. It was weird, and
Yeah.
man, like what's gonna happen next with these dudes and what's going on?
Exactly. And yeah, I'm all about weird here, so the weirder the better for me. And I remember what I was going to say now. I really like how, you said you dropped the reader right in the middle of the story. You didn't take a bunch of time to, explain a bunch of origin stuff to get that. You just drop them right in, which I really like because so many times a lot of people spend all of this time trying to do the origin story and lead up to it, so where you don't actually even get into the meat and potatoes of the story till several issues down the line. And with Kickstarter, unfortunately sometimes with kind of the way the market goes, you don't ever get to that story. All you ever do is just get the origin. So I like the way you and other creators, how you're telling a story but you don't really worry about the origins unless the origins serve the story. So that's why, you've got all your side stories that kind of will go back and explain something that happened in the past. You'll do that later on if the story necessitates it. So I really like that you don't, it doesn't really matter how you got to where you are unless it helps the story in some way. If it doesn't help the story in any way, you just skip over that, which I really like when people do that. Like one of my favorite comic books ever is Astro City, where dive even to the point where I've started writing my own kind of story that is kind of inspired by that a little bit. But I like how you don't really have to worry about in Astro City, you don't have to worry about where someone comes from. You don't have to worry about how they, got their powers because it's a superhero story. And I got to talk to Kurt Busiek on
Nice.
Twitter Twitter X about it once because I just mentioned like, oh, I'd really like to talk to him. I have a question. He just happened to answer me one time, and I asked him, where do you come up with some of these characters where you come up with their powers? And he's like, I don't really worry about where the power comes from unless it is something specific to the story I want to tell. So really, the point is, you've got a character that just has the power. It doesn't matter how they got it unless the story they're telling needs to know how they got their power. And you guys kind of went along that same route where, you just get dropped in the middle of Aiden, right in the middle of this giant battle between, good and evil. And as the story progresses, if there's something you need to tell from a backstory perspective, you guys will be sure to stick that in somewhere. But if it doesn't serve your main story, you don't have it, which I think is really nice because it leaves a little bit of intrigue and it kind of makes you wonder, like, oh, where did, how did this character get to how they were or whatever, something like that. I really like that.
So one thing that's interesting is in the very first story, in the very first issue, there's all these pinups of the villains just saying, here's who they are.
Yeah.
I've had some people say, well, where's the heroes? Like, so issue 6 is that's going to happen for all the heroes, where it's like, and then you're going to be like, oh, geez, like you're really lining this up like an old school cartoon where it's like,
Yep.
here was all the villains. And wait, here's all the heroes.
Yep.
And so people be like, when's that happen? And I'm like, issue 6, trust me, issue 6. And you can
Coming.
start building up in issue 5 when the
Yeah.
summoning, where they fire that living lightning off and like there's it's scooting around the world and it's like, oh, wait, there's all these weird random heroes that are like in hiding, like the Jungle Princess and the dinosaur
Yep.
and the Squid Man and the rocks, where it's like some of the heroes are in their mountain base, they're kind of like we're out, and then the hero Aegis is, he summons them. So
Yeah.
like their big pinup moment where they're all going to get their pinup, where it's like it's coming, and then I think it's going to kind of balance out like, oh, he had the villain pinups first, and now hero pinups, and then it's like, and then the clash, right? We got to
All
introduce
coming together. Yep.
right? Because people are like, why'd you have all that? You didn't have the heroes. It's like I'm getting there, trust me.
They're coming.
But to me, I agree with what Kurt Busiek said because one of the things that I don't like in modern entertainment a lot, and it really annoys me, is a weird need to explain everything.
Ah,
And I think one thing that was great about older films is they could just, say something, and then it was like, oh, okay, cool.
yep.
And there's this weird need to explain everything. And I think probably the biggest serial offender to me is Alien. I thought
Yeah.
Alien was amazing because it introduced you to like the alien
Hmm.
and like where did it like you didn't know, and all you knew was there was this fossilized giant that got killed.
Yeah.
How that thing got there, like we didn't know. And
Hmm.
like so weird that we didn't know because the characters were like it just was confusing, but it was cool. And then I remember when Prometheus came out, I was like, oh, this is cool.
Hmm.
And then it was like whatever explanation we got, it was like, what? Like, did I need like
Yeah.
it actually seemed to make it worse because it's like this the explanation you tried to give me was pretty lame.
Yeah.
You know,
Get it.
like it's like not every single thing needs to be explained, and if it makes sense, and if you have a good idea, that's cool, but sometimes things are better left unsaid.
Yeah.
um, all that being said, and I will tell you this, we are going to do an issue 0 of Lords of the Cosmos because we had some stuff we did over COVID that's just kind of been languishing in folders that needs to get out.
Sure.
One of the questions we asked ourselves when we were locked down was, why do these guys call themselves the Lords of the Cosmos? And myself and another writer shot some ideas back and forth, and we had a really good idea of why they call themselves that. And we actually wrote a story, and it's been drawn. It just needs lettered, and we actually think we had a pretty awesome idea to be revealed in the origin issue, Lords of the Cosmos 0. So, um, but I think our origin story merits it and actually is a good intro to like where the hell some of these characters have come from.
Sure.
And I don't want to spoil it, but I think it's a pretty good one. But I wouldn't put it out unless I thought it was good. And we bounced around a bunch of ideas before we hit one that we were like, "Hmm, pretty good." Like that
Nice.
adds to the story versus being like, you made it worse. We didn't want to know where that guy got his sword from. We didn't need to know, you know. So yeah, I don't think everything needs to be explained unless,
Yeah.
like you, Kurt Busiek, unless it adds to the story. If it adds nothing, like sometimes it's okay just to have an alien in a derelict ship. That's
Yeah.
cool. We didn't need to know. It was cool the way it was. Good
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. Or kind of like, you know, the one I like to use as a comparison is The Incredibles from Disney. You know,
Hmm.
you just get dropped in this world of superheroes, but everyone wants to know like how these guys get their powers, you know, how do they intermingle with, you know, non-powered people? Like it doesn't really matter. They just here they are and here's their powers. You don't need to know really where they came from or why they have them or whatever. They just do. And I'm okay with it. I don't need to know where Mr. Incredible got his strength from. I don't need to know where Frozone got his ice powers from. He just has them and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I would agree. And sometimes an origin story helps, but not all the time. I think
Right.
you got to have a good one. As yeah, you got to earn it, or else it's better. Like I love Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
Um, and I know there was some, Judge Dredd. They kind of went in the origin of him, and there's some 2080 kind of explored it. But for the most part, Judge Dredd's just kicking ass in the Meg, man. We don't
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah, it doesn't
He,
matter.
yeah, he's got his helmet, he's got his law master, he's got his
Yep.
lawgiver. Like he's kicking ass, he's taking names, he's the law.
Yep.
And
That's it.
we don't need to deconstruct him. Sometimes it's just cool that he's just kicking ass and taking names, and he's being the angry fascist police officer that we all love. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And that's cool too.
Yep. All right, so you got a Kickstarter right now for episode, not episode five, for issue five.
Five.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the Kickstarter?
So the Kickstarter, I put a lot of work into it. I had a really awesome graphic designer, Tara Frick, that helped me put the visual look to the campaign. So she tried to give it a 1980s look. So a lot of the graphics look like bowling alley carpet, which to me was a hoot because that was kind of the era and the feel we wanted to have.
Yeah,
And the Kickstarter is different than my prior Kickstarters because it has a lot of add-ons. So you can purchase a tier and then add things on, and
yeah,
that's part of the technology change with Kickstarter because in the past it was always kind of weird where it was like, well, here's a book and a T-shirt, and you might say, well, I'd like a book, a T-shirt, and a sticker. Well, I don't have that. Whereas now it's very modular. So there's
yeah,
with all the original art, there's something like 99 add-ons where you can get stickers, bookmarks, mouse pads, mugs, original art, and even some custom sculptures of the Zemba character from my friend Eric D that sculpts a toy for every issue. So I hope you got a kick out of that in the back of every issue, right?
yeah. That was awesome.
Uh, so there's a lot in the campaign. We have stretch goals. So right now, the first stretch goal unlocks at 8,000 sticker for everybody of one of the characters as a chibi, which is fun. Zembo chibi sticker. And I think the campaign is really cool because there's a lot of easy catch up tiers because obviously it's the fifth issue. So there's
Yeah,
easy ways to get the old books, either physical copies or PDFs. And I think this campaign really has a lot. It's very affordable. You can get issue one just for, or issue five for a couple bucks. So it's very affordable if you just want to get a PDF. And I forget what it is off the top of my head. So forgive me. I think it's just like $5 for a PDF. Um, but there's a lot of stuff you can get. And again, you can build your own custom reward. And I put a ton of diverse things of different dollar values. You can get some really cool stuff and design your own reward, which is really the way it should be.
yeah.
Um, so those are the things I'm really proud with this campaign. Plus, most of the art was physical, not digital.
That's
And
cool.
it's cool because you can get a lot of that art for not a whole lot of money. Most of the original art's just $100 for like a whole
Oh wow,
page.
that's
There's a
cool.
couple that are a little bit more. So I'm really proud of that part of the modular part of the campaign. But one thing that I think is also important about the campaign, and it's kind of a sign of the times. I actually So the last, I'd say year, one of the things that I've really become more, I'd say upset and distressed about is three things. One, I'm not happy with the growth of AI taking creative space and creative people's jobs. I think that's a disaster.
Sure,
So the project has a pledge, and the first part of the pledge is no AI. I don't want AI in this project, and I think it's important for people that are doing actual creative work to be proud of not using AI.
sure,
Because I think AI is just it's cancer to creatives and it's just theft. Two, the book. If there was a freelancer that needed to be paid in the book, they've all been paid. So everyone in the book has been paid. They're done. So the only person that needs to get paid is me, so I can go print some books, right? So I've there seems to be more and more of people doing work and then they're not getting paid. And
sure.
again, I think AI hurts creatives, but I don't know what's worse, AI or creatives hurting other creatives, right? So, oh, do work for me, then I won't pay you. I really I find that offensive.
Sure.
And then the third thing that I'm proud with this project is the book's done. Like the book is done, it's ready to print. I had test copies printed, PDFs are ready to go. Um, so that if you back this book, it isn't, well, I'm going to have to work on it for another year and a half, and I hope
Yeah.
it gets done.
Yeah.
And then what I don't like is then you see backers being like, "Is the book done?" And then the create, well, don't you dare ask me, and something happened, and I'm busy at work, and I don't have time for this, and I'll get around to it when I can. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but if you're a backer and you give me money, like, do you want to hear, well, my dog's sick, or my kid's having problems at school? It's like, well, I gave you $30. Can I get some books? I mean, like, I'm sorry you're having problems, but please don't give me a raft of excuses for why it's not done. I would like my book.
Right.
Sorry for your problems, but I didn't pay you to hear, I didn't do that. You paid for product.
Yeah.
And I did put a very generous fulfillment date of next June, so I had plenty of time to get it done early. But the book's done, so it isn't like I'll be working on it after you pay me. The idea is we'll do surveys and figure out how many books to get and get them ordered. So those are some of the things that are kind of behind the scenes that I think differentiate this campaign maybe from some others. And it's
Sure.
literally at the end of the campaign, there's the pledge and then there's the credits, and the pledge is in black and white. Again, no AI. People that needed to be paid have been paid, and the book's done. So backers, like, you have been taken care of, and sometimes it kind of seems ridiculous to have to spell that out. However, you keep seeing more and more incidents of people that have given money or they've done work and they're not getting paid, or they're not getting what they paid for.
Sure.
And the AI stuff is just, like I said, I've to me it's just a scourge, and it's just strip mining creatives' ideas to pump out derivative products that's stolen. And I actually had a friend that was like, I don't understand how it's theft. I don't. It's not plagiarism. And the way I tried to explain it to him is like, look, I'm not a technology expert, but I'm like, it's not stealing your idea, it's stealing 1/10 of 1% from 1,000 people. I'm like, collectively taking it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, I don't understand how it all works, but I'm like, but that's the general gist of it. And he goes, that's really not cool. And I was like, yeah. So I'm like, that's why you don't want to support it, because it's theft. It's
Yeah.
taking from others. So that's kind of my general gist on the my pitch on the Kickstarter.
That's awesome. Well, I made sure to write down that the Kickstarter ends October 13th. I'll make sure I put the link in the show notes so everyone can go check it out and they'll have plenty of time to look at it. 'Cause it's definitely worth your money. Like you said, it's like $5 a PDF or something like that. I got a couple of the PDFs from you. It's definitely worth the money because they're huge PDFs and it's such a great book. Everyone should go check it out. Now, you had mentioned issue 6 is going to come eventually. Issue 0 possibly could come sometime. What are long-term plans for Lords of the Cosmos?
I think by the time it's all said and done, to complete the main story, it's going to go 10 issues plus a zero, so 11.
Nice.
And
And
six and 0 and 7 are all in different states of like parts of them are all complete now. They're not
Nice.
ready to print, but like chunks of them that are done.
Very nice. Now, after this current Kickstarter is over, what do you have lined up after that that you can talk about? What's coming next from you?
Well, I'm going to focus on fulfilling all the rewards, right?
Perfect.
I'm probably gonna put the book out on Indiegogo for like a second chance campaign. I have a few different things that I'll put on Indiegogo because to be honest, there are some people that like Indiegogo. So what I've done on my last Kickstarter for my coloring book project, the Satanic Coloring Book, I did an Indiegogo and had a few different items. So
Yeah.
these kind of it's like a double dip where it's like here's Kickstarter, here's Indiegogo. The Indiegogo is kind of more of a second chance, like hey, if you missed it, catch it. Here's I'll have like a different variant cover in there just to have one different item in there,
Yeah.
and then the move's going to be to wrap all the book up, print books, and ship them out. And then I may have one or two freelance pieces that I need to wrap up for some clients. And then I need to take a break and then get back to issue 6. So I really want to keep these things like going and get the next issue, you know, cooking. And like I said, there's parts of it that are done now, but I'll have to assess what is done and what isn't done. But my brain on these projects is kind of binary where it's like I don't want to even think much about issue 6. I have a folder for it in my studio. And I'm not I if I start getting my energy put into like another project, then nothing gets done.
That's fair.
So it's kind of like I just got to keep all my mental energy on issue 5 until it's complete, and then I will unlock the part of my brain to say, okay, we'll put that away. Let's look at 6 because one thing that I think vexes creatives, and I know it does me too, is if we get too many things cooking at the same time, nothing gets done. And you have like
Yeah.
4 projects that are like, yeah, they're all kind of done, and then you're like, well, and your energy, especially when you have a full-time job, you have a family, you have kids, you
Yep.
really have to stay laser focused on like, I will get this done,
Yeah.
and then when it is done, we will move it aside, and then we will start the new. But if you
Yep.
got 3, 4 of them like kind of working on, like, it won't get done.
I do. I have to admit I have a few creative projects that have not gotten the attention they need to because attention has been put other places. Like you said, full-time job, family, you get so basically a lot of my time has been focused on this show, and so I haven't had time to deal with other stuff. So I'm still trying to kind of figure out how to make all of that work, but I really like doing the show. So some of the other stuff has to take a back seat, and I'm okay with that because I'm still getting creative in a different way.
So one thing that I picked up on, the older I've gotten, is that when I was younger, I think a lot of younger creatives are trying to hit really high highs, like to make the best possible thing and do the coolest possible project. And I never want to um, say that's bad because it's a great thing to strive for the best.
Yeah, sure.
But what I've picked up on, the older I've gotten, it isn't necessarily about how fast you can sprint. It's about how long you can just walk.
Yep.
And then
I get that.
I've had some creative friends recently that have just stopped, and they just given up. And what I've realized is I'm like, when you're older and you have more stuff going on, sometimes the challenge is to have the high high. The challenge is when you're getting pushed really hard to stop. That if you're just crawling a little bit every day
Yeah.
but not stopping, sometimes that's pretty awesome.
It's better than nothing, really.
And I think that creatives don't acknowledge other creatives enough for just keeping it going like you didn't quit.
Yeah.
And you'd say, well, that's not much of what you didn't quit. You just barely kept it going. But when you have children, you have a family, you have a full-time job, there's a lot of off ramps to say, maybe you
Yeah.
should stop your podcast. Maybe you should stop doing your comic. And if you're just like, I got to give myself a break and like just do a little tiny bit, but I don't want to stop. I
Yeah.
think that is not acknowledged enough as people having like the big show or the big, the big thing, because that gets more attention, obviously. Like, oh my goodness, she did
Yeah.
this huge thing, and oh my God. Um, but you just kept going.
Yeah.
And I specifically from one friend of mine completely exiting the creative space, which actually really kind of uh it kind of hurt my creative energy to see it because I was a big fan. And he just stopped. And he was like, I'm sick of doing this and it's not in my heart anymore. And I just don't want anything to do with it. Thank you very much. And I was like, oh, wow. Um, it really kind of refocused my thought on valuing, even if you're just going one step a day, you're still going forward. So
Absolutely.
I have a lot more appreciation for that and giving people the space to slow down and encourage them to keep going, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah. No, I get that because, I a lot of the reason my writing has stopped is because I had a friend who we did a lot of it together. We'd bounce ideas off of each other, and it really kind of helped encourage me to keep going. And I like to think that it helped encourage him to keep going. But once we no longer became friends, it was really hard because, like you said, I no longer had that person that was encouraging me to go, even if it was, you know, all I did today was create a new character, or all I did was, write 500 words. That's still better than not doing anything at all, which is kind of what I'm currently doing. So, I've always thought that that's something that the creative space needed more of is people working together and not necessarily, collaborating on something, which is always good to do, but just having like a group of people that's just like, hey, you did this thing. What did you do on your thing today? Well, I wrote, 50 words. That's awesome. Like keep going. And I think that's been the hardest thing to kind of get traction on doing is because people always shoot that down. Like, if you can't just create for yourself, then, you shouldn't be creating. But it's like, I want to create for myself, but I also, it's hard to do it by yourself. And it really, it's hard to get the motivation on your own. And if you got someone in your corner saying, hey, like, that's really awesome that you're still doing your thing, keep doing your thing, even if you do a little bit, that means more than a lot to some people.
Well, and then the other thing that can get dangerous, and I found this for really visual artists more than writers, is the don't look down on Instagram, because you can struggle to
Yeah.
get one image done, and then you go on Instagram, and if depending on your feed, you may have a lot of really talented pro level artists, and then you're like, yeah, I did one thing, and then you go in there, and then you're like, oh my Lord, and like you can
Yeah.
actually, I think, make yourself feel like crap.
Yeah.
And it's almost like saying, hey, don't look down.
Yep.
And you may struggle all day to make one image and then go on there and just be like, I suck.
Yeah.
So I would actually encourage people, like, be careful, especially with Instagram, on how much you look around, because it's really good to make yourself feel bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Social
Like
media is really good for that.
yeah, so it's almost like, and not that you shouldn't look at cool stuff, but it's like sometimes, like, just like, 'cause people say, well, people are so much better. I'm like, yeah, but are you doing better than you did a year ago?
Yeah.
Like if you worry about like the professional artist from wherever that has been doing like, it's like Daniel Warren, the comic book artist, dude's sick. Like he's
Yeah.
amazing, right?
He's a
And
great
like
guy.
if you're trying to make comic book art and you look at his work, you can be like, geez, you know what I mean? It's like, what? I mean, his stuff is so good that, like, it's inspiring, but can
Yeah.
actually make you, I mean, and I'm speaking from experience because I've seen some of his stuff, and you're just like, how? Like this guy is sick,
Yeah.
right?
I actually got to
Like,
talk to him on this show, and the whole time we talked, he was drawing the whole time. And I kind of talked to him a little bit about that, where he kind of just was like, well, it's hard to kind of fit that kind of stuff in because, a couple of years ago he just had a kid, and that's how he actually got into pro wrestling is because while he was up with the kid at night, he got started watching pro wrestling. So a lot of his comics have a lot of pro wrestling influence in them. And he just kind of just told me that you just got to kind of make time for that. If you want to be a creative, you just got to kind of make time for that stuff. And if it's not in your heart, then you just can't do it. But if you want to do it, you're going to make the time to do it.
Oh, and I'm singling him out because his stuff is so good that I've
So
seen
good.
recently that
Yeah.
that again it can almost be. I'm even trying to think of the right, like almost like it's so good that it can almost disincentivize you to do work,
Yeah.
right? Like it's so he's so good with what he's
Yeah.
doing now that you're just like, God damn. So like I said, it's like don't look at Daniel Ward's work, right? It's too
You
good.
really gotta take it at face value. Like you can't think of, this person's so good, why can't I be that good?
That's what I'm saying.
You just gotta kind of be happy for the guy and know that
Yeah.
where
Well,
you are, he was at one point.
and
So as long
that's what
as
I'm getting at.
you just gotta keep working. You gotta use it more as inspiration than to
And
use it to get down on yourself.
and what I'm getting at is if you look at people like him, right? And you're starting to compare it, it's like, yeah, but don't that's what I'm saying. Don't look down.
Right.
Look
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
look at those people and say that's cool. But I think it's very easy to see people like him and be like, oh my God, I'm not that good. But it's like, and I've told people like you can't don't look at them that way. Like just look at yourself. Because if you start
Yeah,
looking at like that, it will mess you up. And Instagram,
100%.
yeah, and there's so much of it where it's like you have to like appreciate it, like you're saying, but again, you got to be careful because it's like
Yes.
can't you can't look at those like higher end pro level people and try to be like, oh my God, because
Yeah.
it will push you away. So
Yeah. 100%.
again, yeah. And I'm glad Daniel Warren's a cool person because
Yeah,
sometimes you hear about these people and
yeah.
that you're like, oh, he's not cool, but like I don't know, I don't know him from Adam, but his art always just seems banging.
Yeah, he was awesome. I didn't get to talk to him for more than maybe 15, 20 minutes, but yeah, he was a cool guy. He
Good.
was really awesome. All right, man. Well, I know you've already kind of shared this a little bit where you gave some advice at the beginning, but at the end, I usually like to ask people to kind of give advice to other fellow creatives. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more advice just before we go, just any kind of advice for creatives.
So number one, like I said, don't stop. And if you need to like slow down, you can get to like a very, very slow, but don't stop. I think that's my number one bit of advice. And my other number two piece of advice is try to listen to people that know more than you because I think it sometimes is very hard to admit you don't know something.
Yeah.
It could be with anything like art, writing, editing, whatever. So I think it's very important to listen to others, and I think it's always hard to take criticism, but do your best to try to take it in stride because I think that's one of the hardest things for all of us because we all want to get better, but nobody likes to be told they don't know something.
Yeah.
And I know I've often struggled with that over the years, and I think I still do sometimes. But when I've been able to process it and eat my pride, I've done better. So I think that's the other big thing I would say to everyone. Like, don't quit. It's okay to go really slow and listen to people that know more than you, and you'll get smarter. And this seems like really obvious advice, but
Yeah.
it's harder than you think.
It really is, especially the whole taking advice thing, because really you'll take it and you'll take it as criticism instead of advice sometimes, and that can be really hard, and you could get some hurt feelings over that. But you have to be kind of open-minded to that kind of thing to know that, you know, you went to that person to ask them, so you should be open to hearing their kind of feedback, whether it's positive or, if it ends up being negative, you still should, you ask them for advice. So you can't get upset for what they tell you unless they're being blatantly mean to you, which can happen sometimes, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think I mean it's like so one of the biggest things that I had to learn recently was how to format pages.
Mhm.
And what had happened was like last May, I went back to my printing company and said, "Hey, I need to reorder the old back issues of Lords of the Cosmos." And the gentleman who was the general manager at the printing company was like, "Well, the guy that was printing your books doesn't work here anymore." And he was actually printing your files from like without a consistent format and like the margins are all off. You never noticed that. And I was like, what? I'm like, why didn't he stop me? And he's like, yeah, he goes, everything you sent is inconsistent. He goes, you really got to start from scratch and reformat all these old books.
Wow.
And I was like, I was like angry. And then I was like angry at them. And then I was angry at myself. And then I just was like, this is bullshit. And why do I have to learn this? I shouldn't have to do it. And I just was pissed.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I guess. And then I started reformatting issue one, page one. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I should have learned this 7 or 8 years ago. And now I'm going to learn how to do it. And 9 months later, after I reform, and then I was like, hey, and then I remember I was talking to Dave Sharp, who's our letterer, and Dave's awesome. He does a lot of work for DC. He does lettering for Green Lantern.
Oh, nice.
Super comic book guy, lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, not too far from me. So I see him at shows and stuff.
Nice.
And we talked about it, and he was like, I am very proud that you finally learned that because I noticed it was an issue. And I was like, you noticed it? And he's like, yeah, but you needed to learn it on your own, man. And he goes, you had to know it was a problem and you decided to learn it and now you fixed it. And he goes, and now he goes, you're smarter, dude. He goes, you learn more. And he goes, but see, he goes, a lot of guys still don't learn it, but he goes, I'm proud of you because he goes, you took it and you got pissed off and he goes, you did the work and now you are smarter at the game. You're like, I wish I didn't have to reformat that many pages, but you learn, you know what I mean? And that was I went through like anger, whatever, all the seven, like I'm like, what? Why didn't you tell me this years ago? Why did that guy not say something? Blah 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 blah. But it is what it is, man. But you learn and you get better. So if you're gonna print a comic book, here's another thing. Learn your page format, learn your bleeds, learn your margins. Don't send mismatched files. There's your other bit of advice, okay?
There you
Take
go.
criticism, learn your page formatting, and don't be like me.
Fair enough. All right, man. So where can we keep up with you on social media? Where can we find out all the new goodness from Lords of the Cosmos and all the other stuff you're putting out?
So the easiest thing, if you're into X, formerly known as Twitter, which is ridiculous, is
That's a whole
art
other conversation.
Lenox artist, and it's the same on Instagram at Lennox artist, Lenox artist. I have an art page on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Jason Lennox Illustrator. You can find my personal page on Facebook, which has a picture of me from elementary school that looks like it's washed out and like pink at this point because of the old photo.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, if you like stuff about geese and heavy metal and horror films and stupid memes, you can go crazy and be my friend on Facebook, like you are, Chris, because we're friends on Facebook.
We are friends on Facebook.
And you see my geese posts and
Yeah.
everything else. And
Yeah.
my website is just jasonlennox.com, and that's kind of a gigantic art repository for things that I've done for the last 13 or so years. So
Very cool. Now, for me, I first want to thank Polygon Horizon for the use of their song Pizza Force. It's the theme song for the show. It's a great song. You can go check them out on Bandcamp. They're a great band. Go show them some love on there. You can find Fueled by Weird on Instagram and Facebook. You can find my email, fueledbyweird@gmail.com. You can hit me up for all sorts of different things. You can find this interview and lots of other interviews on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And now you can find me on the Spotlight Media GA app, along with the rest of the boys in the Stay Weird Network shows. Uh, the Nerdy Manroom Show with Hassel and Monster, Hassel's Review, and Big Rob's House of Entertainment, and No Chinese Food. Now, speaking of Stay Weird Network, it's a brand new podcast network dedicated to bringing some awesome back to the internet. You can check us out at Stay Weird Media on YouTube, and you can email us stayweirdmedia@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Stay Weird Media. And I also want to take a minute to thank my sponsor, The Zone Collectibles in Tifton, Georgia, your one-stop shop for comics, collectibles, and so much more. Now, if you like this show, please leave a review and tell your friends because word of mouth is my friend. And remember, kids, life's too short to be normal, so stay weird. Jason, thanks so much for joining me tonight, man.
thanks, man. Appreciate it. Stay weird.
Stay weird.